Hello everyone, it's the Bookatarian here, and today I thought I would do my review on The False Prince by Jennifer A. Nielsen. So this book follows a boy named Sage, who is an orphan, an immigrant, and a 14-year-old boy who's almost 15, who grew up in a orphanage in a country or a kingdom called Carthia. And one day he is approached and corralled/forcibly removed from the orphanage against his will by a nobleman named Connor. And he, among a handful of other orphan boys that kind of share similar characteristics and physical appearances, and they are brought back to Connor's estate, and they partake in this competition kind of to see who would be the best candidate for becoming the false prince. Um, so, so my thoughts on this book, non-spoilery, are that I really enjoyed this book, and I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did, especially after I found out how young the protagonist was. I still have a mental hesitation, especially now as I'm getting older, that with protagonists that are significantly younger than myself, I'm like, oh, wait, am I really going to relate well to this character? And whilst I didn't, that didn't stop me from enjoying the book altogether. So, aside from the main character being borderline middle grade age, I still very much enjoyed the book. And another problem that I kind of had a little bit was with one of the side characters who there's just certain decisions that Imogen made throughout the book that didn't sit well with me very much at all. And I'll explain it more in detail in the spoilery section. But yeah, so some of the characters I didn't get on too well with, but on the whole, I enjoyed most of them. And I thought also that the narrator, the person who performed the audiobook recording, did a really, really good job with all the different voices for the different characters. And he literally made me believe that he was reading for a teenage boy. And I thought that was kind of a funny thing to pay attention to whilst I was listening to the audiobook. But like, oh yeah, he literally sounds like a teenage boy. Which kind of sounds like an insult, but it's really not, because if you can make yourself actually sound like the protagonist, you're doing your job fairly well. So I really enjoyed the narration, the performance, how it was edited, and like I said, all the voices for the different characters. I especially like how he voiced Cregan, because every time Cregan said anything, I was just like, gross. Go away. You're so vile. And so that just made me, impressed me pretty much. It impressed me how well he did the different narrations for different voices for the characters. The plot I really enjoyed a lot. The plot was very well paced, I think, and I did not see anything coming at all. Literally nothing. Normally it's like a 50-50 with me. I didn't guess anything, and I think that might have been because I literally almost listened to it all in one night. Like I was listening to the audiobook while I was working, so it was pretty much an uninterrupted reading, basically. So I didn't really have time to mull anything over or form any theories, so that's probably why I didn't guess any of the storylines at all. But it's still impressive to me if I can't guess anything. So they did a good job in not being obvious, as far as my opinion goes, anyways. Let's see what else I can say in the spoiler-free section. This book made me unbelievably paranoid. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. reading it / listening to it since I wasn't physically reading it. But it was just so addicting because it was so fast-paced throughout the entire thing. And that just made it all the more enjoyable for me, especially because if I don't get hooked onto a book after 100 pages, it kind of lessens the enjoyment that I'll experience out of that book, and it'll be a deciding factor as to whether I read it or not. So I'm just glad that it was very gripping right from the start and continued to be gripping throughout the rest of the story, which is generally what I tend to look at as a minimum for a book that I'll really, really love. Alright, so now I will get into my spoiler-filled thoughts. So if you have not read the book yet, I suggest you leave, read it, and then come back and we can discuss our thoughts on the book together. So I'm gonna start with the end. Oh my gosh, from like the 75% mark, 3/4 of the way through, I was just like, I can't stop reading it. Unfortunately, by that time, it was time for me to stop because the store was opening, so I had to put my headphones away and do other things, and was not able to continue reading it until I got home. But oh boy, I was just losing my mind at how intense the ending was. Up until, like, when Sage started talking about his story and how he was actually Prince Jaren in disguise as Sage, faking being Prince Jaren, I was just like, wait, what? At first, I was very confused as to why Sage was just randomly jumping into this story that he would not know about until the point where he said, and I became Sage, and I was just like, oh, I feel stupid now. I was just like, why did it suddenly go into this random story? I mean, it's relevant, sure, because we're faking being a prince, but I was very confused. And I was also very confused as to when Mott found out that Sage was actually Jaren. And then I thought that maybe it was Sage telling Mott his story, and that's how he knew. I don't know. Sometimes I zone out when I'm listening to audiobooks, so I occasionally miss little details, so that's probably how it happened. If any of you know, just leave it in the comment below that I missed something, because that was another thing that just kind of confused me a little bit. But aside from that, the ending was so good and so intense when Rodin and Cregan ambushed the group in the tunnels, and they had that fight. The crown was tossed in the river, and Tobias. I gotta say, Tobias really grew on me throughout the book. He was a very, very typical teenage boy, in my opinion. Like, whenever I react to teenage boys being teenage boys, for now, I basically just picture Tobias's face and attitude. I'm like, you're pulling a Tobias on me, kids. And yeah, he just got so much better after the end. And when Sage asked him to be his friend instead of his servant, I was just like, oh, it's so touching that you trust him even after he threatened your life multiple times. I don't know how well that's going to turn out. I've only just started the second book. I'm not really far into it at all. So I don't know how that's quite going to work out just yet. But Tobias was a character that I did like for most of the book until the very end, where it's like, oh, he's good now. Okay. Maybe the character development wasn't quite as good as I thought it was, now that I'm thinking about it. It just kind of like brushed over all the negative things that he did earlier. But I don't know. We'll see. Now, as far as Imogen goes, I was really hoping she was actually mute, because then that would have made it so much more interesting. But no, she was faking it. Granted, she had good reasons for doing so, but it still rubs me very much the wrong way. Faking a disability is just, it's very disrespectful to the people who actually have these disabilities and can't just like, oh, wish it away one moment and put it back on the next. Like, no. It's just seen as very disrespectful. And I get why she had to do it to escape the attention of Connor, that's fine. But, so she didn't have my vote for this love triangle that seems to be forming, that seems to have been established in this book, as far as that goes. Between Amarinda, which for the longest time, when I heard Amarinda's name, I was like, Amarantha? Oh, that's gonna get confusing. But I think her name is Amarinda. It's still very close, and I might accidentally end up calling her Amarantha and picture her as a redhead, but she's not. Um, it's funny that it's either funny or really good planning and a really good basis for an actual realistic depiction of love, because one of them is friends with Sage and feels loyal to him, but there's no established love yet. And the other one, like, I guess is repulsed by him. Yeah. And it's funny, in the second book, there's a lot of Sage, like, beating himself up, like, oh, I'm no Darius, I could never live up to her expectations. And I'm just like, well, then stop trying. You're not Darius, you're you. Why? It's teenage insecurities. I get that. But, so yeah, there's probably going to be a love triangle. And I'm not the largest fan of love triangles, since they often don't really turn out that well, or are done very well, as far as the books that I have read and my experiences with them. I really enjoyed Mott's friendship with Sage. Granted, after he was informed that Sage is actually Jaren. I didn't enjoy the whole dungeon torture thing. That was just like, oh, come on, Mott, you know you don't want to do this, but you have to because you work for Connors. And I'm just sitting over here like, okay, yes, justify the beating of a teenage boy. Justify the murder of another teenage boy. Just, oh boy. And seriously, Roden's betrayal, I was expecting Cregan to do something about it, about Connors choosing Sage. But Roden, I'm like, I thought you guys were better friends than that. And again, I really should have seen that coming, because this is a competition, presumably to the death. So really nobody should be trusted, and yet I ended up trusting you anyways. Unfortunately for me. And I was just, okay. And I really love that Sage is left-handed. I'm left-handed, and I found that we are very underrepresented in books. There are very few left-handed people in books. So it's nice to have that representation given me a little sliver there. I enjoyed that. What else? I think that might be all that I have to say about the book for now. I'm currently reading the second book, so I might be filming a review for that one next week sometime. Until then, I will see you all later. Bye!